Hello and welcome everyone. Welcome to another live session at the Reactors. Before we begin, please take a moment to read our code of conduct. We're all here to learn, so please be respectful of other people's views, understanding of differences, and please be kind and considerate in the way you engage. The chat will be open throughout, and we do encourage you all to participate. This session will be recorded and will be available to view on our YouTube channel instantly. Today's session is on GitOps Extension for VS Code, and this session will be led by Kingdon. Kingdon is a Flux maintainer and an open source support engineer. So with that, I'm now going to bring Kingdon on the screen, and he will now lead the session. Hi, Kingdon, over to you. I'll be in the background if you need me.
Great, thank you for the introduction. Hi, everyone. Welcome. This is my first time on the Microsoft Reactor, so I'm a little bit nervous, but thanks for joining me today. And let me get my screen share going here so we can see what we have prepared for the presentation today. So we're going to talk about the GitOps VS Code extension for Flux. There's a lot of extensions in Microsoft Azure, as I'm sure you're probably aware. This is an extension for VS Code, and a lot of you, I'm assuming, are not going to be familiar with Flux, since this is not a Flux audience specifically. I'm not really sure what type of audience I'm going to get, but if you are joining us today with or without any Flux experience, so welcome. I'd like to get a sense in the comments, perhaps, if people are totally new to Flux or if they're totally new to Kubernetes altogether. Would be great to get hello from London. Hello, Liam. We've got a live audience. This is great. All right. So let's get started. Here, this is me. I'm Kingdon Barrett. I'm an open source support engineer at Weaveworks. I'm also a Flux maintainer. And here's an overview of what we're going to talk about today. So like I said, I don't want to come in with any assumptions about your knowledge of GitOps. So I would like to do a little brief presentation on what is GitOps and what is the architecture of Flux to start with. But we'd like to move on as quickly as possible to the VS Code extension and what is the experience actually like. This might be the first experience of Flux for a lot of people at some point in the future. We're going to put this in the extensions marketplace. So there is a real chance that people are just going to stumble upon it and find out about Flux that way. So we'd like for it to be a good experience for that type of new user of Flux. We're just going to go over how do you install this today. Since it's in a pre-release state, there's a little bit of extra stuff that you have to know where to find it. If you're able to try this out today, if you have a Kubernetes cluster and Flux, or if you have a Kubernetes cluster and you'd like to try installing Flux on it, the demo that I'm going to give should work with any Kubernetes cluster. I have been using Kind to develop it. I'm going to use Azure Kubernetes today. We may hit some warts because I have not tested this demo on Azure Kubernetes already, but we did. I think it will work. We'll see. Some things may go wrong. If that's the case, we're going to try to fix it live. That is usually my favorite part of the demo. Gets blood pumping. Get a little bit excited when it works. Hopefully it works. We'll see. And so this is going to be a live demo. And then we're going to talk about some of the different options for Flux that are available that Microsoft has helped to put into their products. So I'm here representing Flux, basically. And this is the VS Code extension for Flux at a glance. This is the tree view of all the Flux resources. We're going to learn more about those in a minute. You can see that there's a clusters view up here. If you have only one cluster, it will show up here. And the view is to help you see whether Flux is installed or not. That's the main focus here. There's also the Kubernetes extension, which is related. If you're familiar with Kubernetes and VS Code already, these things are not going to be new to you, but this is probably new to you. So they're divided into two sections, sources and workloads, to help you understand that Flux is first fetching from a source into your cluster, and then it's applying the workload to the cluster. So that's a little bit hand-wavy explanation because we're going to go into more detail soon, but let's start with a quick demo first. I think that will be the best way to see exactly what Flux is like. So first, apologize here. Let's see. So I have to get my Kubernetes cluster connected first. So I'm going to go find my test cluster that I've just created. I haven't done anything to this cluster yet. And I'm going to figure out the kube config. That's the first step here. So I have my, I think it's AZ auth login. Let's see. I have to download a kube config to connect to my cluster. Here we go. And I think I can list the Kubernetes clusters. We should only see one in here. Okay. And we have this credentials command. Get credentials. So I need to pass in some information about my cluster. I know it's called test cluster. And I know there is a resource group that I created to put the cluster into called MS Reactor Demo. Oops. And we should see a live cluster. Okay, it's a brand new cluster. There's nothing running on it except for the default Azure components. The only things that I've done are I selected Calico with KubeNet for my network. And this is a little bit in the weeds here. So I'm going to bootstrap Flux first. I'm going to do this outside of the extension. I've got a repository here, and pretend this is an empty repository. We're going to bootstrap an empty context in here, so it might as well be an empty repository, but there are some other clusters listed in here. We'll have some resources to draw from as we go on from a previous instance of this demo. So this is the Flux bootstrap command, and you can find it if you want to start with the docs, in the getting started guide. And we're going to bootstrap generic Flux. So the first thing we're going to run into, I think, is that I don't actually have Flux installed. So this is the recommended way to install Flux if you have Homebrew available. If you don't, there are some other options. There's Chocolatey, there's Bash. You can just pipe curl to Bash if you want. This is probably not the best option, but it's certainly one of the more accessible ones. We recommend this way. If you are using the extension for the first time and you haven't installed Flux yet, you will get a prompt to install Flux, but it's just going to copy the latest binary into user local bin, and there's no process for keeping that up to date. So we'd like for people to use one of these methods, since this will help you keep your Flux installation up to date. Oh, and it turns out I actually do have Flux installed already. So we'll see that it's the correct version. I see I have to do, I've never seen that before. I think it's this copy of Flux that I downloaded outside of Homebrew. Yeah, it was. Okay. We're getting into things wrong a little bit earlier than I planned. Okay, here we go. Great. So this bootstrap command here, you select your context. I have a little helper here to let me know what context I have in my shell. You want a GitHub user. Maybe your GitHub user is, hopefully you already have GitHub. If you don't, you'll probably want to go out and create one. So Flux is installing from a Git repository content for your Kubernetes cluster. That's the basic idea of what Flux is all about. So here's our repository link. I think actually I want this one. Okay. And we're on the main branch. It's a personal repository, and we're going to point it at our cluster path, which does not exist yet. So it's going to create some files in here, and then we're going to pull them down and see what they are. I need a personal access token to do this so that Flux can write to the Git repository, which it's not just going to do with your SSH keys by default. It doesn't assume that. Put this off screen real quick and paste it in. Okay, and so there is a method in the extension for installing Flux, but I'm not using it, and we'll get to the details about why in a bit. But it has something to do with the difference between using a managed Flux like Microsoft provides with Arc or the Kubernetes Flux add-on, and using Flux that you manage yourself. So we're managing Flux ourselves here. That's what we're doing. It's called bootstrapping. Said we'd need to do a git pull to see what's changed. Yep, okay, we've got our changes here. And now let's open it up in VS Code. So what we see here is we have our test cluster. It's been detected. It has Flux installed on it. We see a Git repository. We see a customization. And the customization is what's actually doing the applying here. The Git repository is just a source. All right, so that's a little bit off in the weeds. We're going to come back to this. There is actually a second part to this demo that requires that we have some workloads installed, but we'll come back to that once we've talked a little bit more about what workloads are in Flux and what does that mean exactly. So let's go back to the slides. Oops. Okay, so about the VS Code extension, the main goal is to present a nice interface that gets out of your way. And so there's a lot that is meant to be deliberately understated in the UI. We'd like to be able to surface information about what's wrong when things break. We would like to help people adopt VS Code so that they can get access to the advanced features there, like auto-completing in YAML and open API validation to help you create valid YAML files and make sure that they're valid before you put them in a commit and try to push them to your cluster. And also to help improve your development velocity by reducing the number of context switches that you have to endure. Every time you have to switch between your editor and your terminal, hypothesize that that is a context switch in your brain and that it's going to slow you down at some point. So I'm a heavy terminal user, so it's challenging for me to stay in the editor. But I do find that when I really focus on doing that, it does help retain focus and help iterate faster. So there are some non-goals also. As we've seen, you still may need to bootstrap using the Flux CLI. You may need some other behaviors that you can only access through the Flux CLI at this point. And at this point, the VS Code extension doesn't quite cover 100% of Flux. It may never cover everything. It also does not cover this critical feature of Flux, which is monitoring. And it's related to this idea that maybe pop-ups in your editor are the wrong thing, and we don't want to make your, add additional context switches when what we're talking about, the main goal of this is to actually get the number of context switches down. So I said I would explain what GitOps is for those who are new. These are the principles of GitOps. They are a vendor-neutral definition that's been created by this GitOps working group. You can find this page and more at opengitops.dev. The goals of GitOps are the same as the goal that we have for this extension in a way. So we would like to make Git as your single source of truth. And I'm mentioning these ideas now because they underpin GitOps, but they also underpin the ideas in the extension that I'll draw your attention to these two, that if you've already thought of putting your Git, your YAML manifests into Git and using a tool to apply them to the cluster, this may be different than what you had expected if you're not familiar with Flux. So the agent runs inside of the cluster and it reconciles continuously or on an interval. So that means that there's no instantaneous, event-driven, this is a new version and now it goes to the cluster. There is a permanent definition that lives in Git of how the system should be. And as the system is meant to be updated, the changes go into Git. And they're pulled into the cluster automatically, and then they're reconciled on a continuous basis. So the fact of being declarative is basically essential for Kubernetes. All of the Kubernetes artifacts are declarative, and it's essential for GitOps too. This is a requirement for the system to make it work in the way that it's desired. And that the storage is versioned is also a requirement. It does not have to be Git, and it does not have to be Kubernetes. But for the example today, we are only going to look at Kubernetes. So some other goals for today's workshop. I would like to try to add some new users to the VS Code extension, and maybe you're willing to install this and help us test it out. We'd like to find out if there are any user experience blockers that might need to be resolved before we put this in the marketplace. We don't want it to be dead on arrival. We'd like to get positive reviews from people when they find it, even if this is their first experience with Flux. And also to get some feedback to see if there are reasons we can easily access about why you would or would not want to use this. So, and also while we're here, if you have questions about Flux, I'm more than happy to answer. That we'll try to stay a little bit closer to the topic of the VS Code extension. But if you have general questions about Flux, I will present a list of important links for Flux to help you learn how to use Flux and to complete your education about Flux. The star of the show is Flux, of course. And how, what we're going to show Flux in generic mode. So there are a couple of different ways to run Flux on Azure. That Microsoft has provided a few different options. I'm here presenting just Flux itself. So it will run on Kubernetes. It will run fine on Azure, but we may see some things break. We'll see. And also, just to scale back our initial goal to see how, I'm not really sure what kind of audience we have here, whether people are familiar with Flux and GitOps at all, but we're going to introduce the Flux controllers briefly just to see. Here are all of the Flux controllers. So we've already mentioned sources and workloads. Customized controller and Helm controller are responsible for managing workloads. So the source controller manages sources. We've mentioned the concept of notification as a first-class entity. There's a controller that's dedicated to that. And we haven't talked about these. We may talk about them briefly, but they're not the focus of today's demo. How do new releases get into a system like this, where the source of truth is Git? The answer in Flux is image reflector and automation controller, or also known as image update automation. So here's at a glance, how does the system sort of work? And it's a bit oversimplified for simplicity of understanding for folks who are new to GitOps as a concept. You have your developer here and you have your system, which is some code. and you have a Git repository that you push your system into. Then this reconciler takes it and it applies it to Kubernetes, and it receives feedback about how that went, or whether it will work at all, and it can be blocked if there's an error at this point. It will either all or nothing apply. That's the idea. So it is a little bit oversimplified because you actually probably have a CI system in here at some point that's going to build images, and Flux is not responsible for building images. Flux CD. So there's a clean line put between CI and CD. If you're not familiar with those terms, continuous integration is a system that would run the build, for example, and produce a new image, a new container image to run in your Kubernetes cluster. And then delivery, of course, is about actually getting that into a running system in production. So this robot here taking a selfie is Flux taking the new images and it's pushing them to the cluster this way, or taking the new configuration and pushing it to the cluster. But we also said from our GitOps principles that this happens in the cluster. And I said pushing just now, that's actually a pull. We're pulling into the cluster. So Flux runs on the cluster, and it pulls from Git, and it may pull from the output of your CI system as well. That is ways for changes to get into the system, into the cluster. So from Git, it's pulling YAML, and from a container registry, it's pulling images. Those are responsibilities of Flux. So we have actually probably more than one Git repository. If you have multiple apps that you're developing, if you're using a microservices approach, they're maybe spread across Git repositories. You may have different teams with different access requirements, and you may manage that through Git repositories. Then we'll have an entire configuration repository just for the system itself, which is separate. This is where we describe the state of the system as it is applied. So we may do releases in here. We say there's a new release, and we may be automatically deploying it to the cluster, but that's not necessarily the case. We may have a pointer to a specific release inside the cluster that says this is the release to install, and we want to update that pointer when it's time to move to a new release. So hopefully this diagram's been a little bit instructive here. So I've labeled this a config repository, and here is Flux doing the work inside of the cluster to get the changes into your running system. So I'd like to show how to install the extension. And I know I glossed over how to install Flux pretty quickly. There's a lot of documentation about that you can follow to understand in detail. I am going to stay pretty much glossed over how does that part work, but we can uninstall Flux and reinstall it if that's helpful. We'll get there. Let's start with, we'd like to get some workload installed on the cluster and then deploy a change to it in a way that we can see. So I'm sorry, let's pull this terminal away. We don't want to use the terminal. We're using the editor extension. Like I said, I'm a heavy terminal user. It's hard for me. Please bear with me. Fortunately, there's a terminal in the editor, so I don't have to give up everything. And we've got this list of clusters. So let's see the list of clusters. And I'm looking for my example. I know it's in here somewhere. Sorry. Pod info. Okay. So we're going to copy this whole directory. I'm just going to do it using the terminal. I'm not going to try to figure out find pod info. Okay, copy pod info to our new cluster called test cluster. And we're just going to put it in the test cluster directory. And add that. And push it to Git. And I'm just going to hook that up to the right origin there. So I can just type git push next time and it'll work. Okay. So we're going to go over here and see if we see anything changing. And we do. We've got something happening already. We've got a Git repository that's been added. So let's take a look at the files that we've just added. Here in the test cluster, we've added a customization, which is going to install pod info using Helm. And there's another option here to install it using Customize, but we're going to use Helm today. And we're also creating a namespace for pod info. And let's look at the definition of our pod info Helm installation here. So there's a Git repository. That's that Git repository we just saw. And there's a Flux customization that deploys from this path. This path where? This path in the pod info source. So we create a source that points to this Git repository. That's the second Git repository. And we create an applier, a customization to apply from a directory in that. So let's see if that worked. We did have a little red light here. Just going to mouse over to see. Okay, it tells me there are some dependencies not ready. There were other things in that repo, in that cluster that we needed to copy to make this work. So let's copy some more things. So here's one. Oops. We need our ingress controller. I don't have an ingress controller. You could use the AKS add-on for this. I haven't selected that, so I'm not going to be using any AKS add-ons today. And we'll talk about why in a little while. Let's make a directory for this. And we'll add that. And push the change. So things may take a little while to apply. The defaults in here, let's go and look at the default settings for how long does a reconciliation take. It looks like, well, not that long. Okay, so we don't need to look at that quite just yet. Let's see what is wrong now. Here, it says running health checks. Okay, and we've got a Helm release. It says reconciliation in progress. Looks like it worked. So this is going to health check now, and it does look like it found that things are functioning. So we should see pod info deploying quickly, and we see it actually started deploying now. So there's something we're going to have to fix. Just thought of this. In our Helm repository, Helm release. So let's look at these here. Nope, that's not the way to do it. Okay, apps. Ingress. So we've got a Helm release. It has some settings. These are the settings that you need for kind if you're going to use local cluster. We don't need any of these. So we're just going to wipe these out and wipe this out. We don't need to specify values. We're just going to use a generic ingress nginx chart. So let's fix that. Now, how could I have known that? There's nothing on here that would have helped me figure that out right away. Is there? Well, install retries exhausted. Perhaps there is something behind there that would have helped, but I know for a fact that this is not going to work the way it is. We need to fix that. So let's put that in the Git repository. See what's changed here. What do we have? That looks like trash. And what's this diff? Now I see why it's fast. Okay, I have some things in here I thought I had committed earlier and they're not. That's fine, we'll leave them. Okay, so we're trying to sprint to the working demo of pod info, and let's see if we can see pod info running now. We've got image pull back off. There's another customization in here that we need to fix. So this one is in pod info itself. This is in a separate repository. We're going to go open another session of VS Code for that. Oops. And we'll get this terminal out of the way. Okay, so the problem is I've used an internal image registry here from my previous demo. I'm going to change this out for the official pod info upstream that's public. And we're going to push that and see if it works. And I think that we're going to need to specify a version also. Let's short circuit that because I have a newer version installed here. Well, let's see if it works anyway. I'm not sure what that's all about. Oh, yeah, it's complaining about some tags I have. Can we just do git push? Yeah, that worked. Okay. So let's take a look at this pod and see what image it's trying to pull. 6.1.4. And we will need to set a different version because I think that version doesn't exist. So let's go see this one here real quick. But first, oh, there is a 6.1.4. We're in luck. All right, so I bet this is going to work. But we're in install retries exhausted. Uninstall. So we're going to let it start over since it failed to install. We're going to uninstall and start over because Helm has this situation where you can have a terminal installed release that failed and it just needs to be uninstalled and try again. So I did mention we were going to be off in the weeds a little bit. This is further into the weeds than I wanted to go. I apologize, but I hope you're enjoying this. See if it works this time. No, Error image pull. I'm sorry, this is not working at all. So my configuration is a little bit too spread out over too many repos here, I think is what I'm concluding. Let's go and see if we can find exactly what's wrong. So this is our GitHub Actions demo repo. And this is our pod info repo. Okay, and over here we have a Helm release. Customization. So something is replacing this image with another one, and it might be in the source code. Let's start there. Here in the chart. Yep. All right. Let's put this back. And let's name an image release that actually does exist. Okay. One more time. I think we're actually on a branch. Head back. Okay. Oh, that's very nice. Okay, so it's synchronized our change. I see this number matches that number. Might still be stuck on that broken pod info here. Let's try one more time. Reconcile. I actually meant to have this part up and running at the very start, so I really do apologize. But maybe this is helpful for some folks to see how you go about debugging such a thing. Or maybe not. We're still getting this. Huh. See if I can find it anywhere in the source repo here. We've got one mention here and one mention here. Oh, I thought we fixed that one already. Maybe we did on the branch. Yeah. So I think there is a faster way, or better than the terminal way. We can suspend this and resume. I think that will, oops, that's not going to work. Too bad. What if we set our cluster provider to generic? There we go. All right, well, before we're running out of time, I guess I'd better show everyone how to install this extension. Hopefully you're still interested. So this is the repository where we're working on this extension. And we know there are some usability issues. Some of them may belong to Flux and some may belong to the extension. But this is a pre-release extension, so you can go here to find the latest release. And you can download it this way. Now I'm going to uninstall the extension here so that we can see the workflow. Here, let's quit and come back. So because this is a pre-release extension, we have some documentation down here to tell how to build and create your own version. But you can use this install from v6 instruction here to get it installed. So you can do it from the command line or you can do it in the interface. We just go to extensions, install from v6, go to the downloads here, grab that one, and now it's installed. And this is our extension here. So once you have that installed, you get this pane for interacting with Flux. And what kind of error did we get this time? There's another pain point that I'm aware of this is a little bit less informative than we'd like. There's an event behind here that actually surfaces more information, but currently the only way to see that is with kubectl describe. And we already know what's wrong with this. It's having an image pullback off. So broadly, that's what we see here. Install retries exhausted, dependency. Well, dependency is not ready. That's the previous error we fixed. Timed out waiting for the condition. Operation cannot be fulfilled. That's less helpful than I was hoping. This is the error message here that we wanted to see. Deployment is not ready. 0 out of 2 expected pods are ready. So we've seen a number of changes push. We unfortunately did not get to see the web application behind that because of some issues with my demo. Hopefully that won't detract anyone from trying the extension. But let's go back and talk about some more presenter stuff here. Let's start. Wait, okay. No, I wanted presenter view. Okay, so we've introduced the Flux controllers, and hopefully everybody has a basic idea of what Flux is and how it works from the diagram and from our experience working with it just now. Here's a list of pre-flight checks for the demo. Maybe should have been a bit longer. So the one thing that did actually go smoothly here was installing Flux with the Bootstrap. And I want to talk a little bit about the options for Flux that are available in Azure. There's Azure Arc, and there's an AKS add-on that's called the Flux extension, not to be confused with the VS Code Flux extension. So when you are using either of these services, Microsoft is managing your Flux installation for you. When you are using the generic mode, what you'd like to do, if your installation is permanent at least, is have Flux managed from inside of the Git repo. So there's a set of manifests that define what is Flux and how is it installed, and those are updated by updating the Git repo. So there is a process. It's documented in the Flux docs here. Let's go to that slide. In the installation docs, we've seen this. This is how you can get Flux for your workstation platform. As you go on, you want to know how to upgrade Flux. Well, these instructions assume that you have, there's a little bit helpful guy over here if you have a bigger screen. So these instructions start assuming that you have used Bootstrap to install Flux. And I want to highlight this that shows how to use a GitHub action to upgrade Flux. So we're going to take this automated Flux updates workflow, and we're going to add it to our repository. In a file in our config repo. Need to make a .github directory, and under that, workflows. Whoops. We'll call it update Flux. And in here, we've got two critical sections. Well, first, we've got this Flux action that installs the latest version of Flux, CLI, into the workflow actions runner. And then we run this command, and you see it points at a specific cluster to update one of the two files that Flux installs in this directory. Well, Flux installs 3 files in this directory, but let's add this. And let's actually back our cluster down to a previous version so we can see what this looks like when it runs. So we've got this old version of Flux here. Here, if you happen to install Flux manually and you run into this error, you probably already know how to do this, but you have to right-click on binaries in OS X to say they are allowed to be executed. This is a little bit extra, in my opinion. Great. Okay, so we've got this binary now. Move it to our path, and we'll run that Flux Bootstrap command again, but with that copy of Flux that we just installed. So we'll get an older version of Flux and get my GitHub token. We'll see what Flux has done. So you see when you upgrade or downgrade Flux, it only writes to this one file. And if we open this file, we can see it's rather long. It has all of the definitions for everything in Flux in it. So it includes custom resource definitions, and it has a version number at the top and this do not edit warning here. So if you should need to edit anything in here, why would you need to edit anything? Well, there's a good list of reasons on the Bootstrap cheat sheet. You might need to increase the number of workers, or you might want to enable Helm repository caching, or security lockdown for a multi-tenant environment. So I'm going to copy this one in, not the whole thing, just one example here. So we'd like to piecemeal make our Flux a little bit more secure for multi-tenancy bit by bit. And that's going to require us to make some changes in our manifests as we go. And I'd hope we'd have more time for this part, but unfortunately some things went wrong. So if we'll go back to, here is our Flux system. This example shows customize overlay patches. And here is our customization without any patches. So here, if we want to add some patches, we can copy this part, copy the whole thing, since the rest is the same. And we can select just the patches that we want, or use them all. So like I said, I just want this patch. Oops. So let's get rid of some other patches here. Only want this one patch. And what this patch does is it prevents you from using a feature of customize itself. So there's two customizes here. This is another slightly confusing thing in Flux. This customization is not the same as this customization. If you look at the API version, they differ. This is Flux's customize, and it's in the Flux CD toolkit domain. And then this is under the hood of that. This is customize that's used for templating YAML. The upstream project, SIG CLI customize. So if you need to customize Flux, this is how you do it. And the examples in this Bootstrap cheat sheet are great for many use cases of Flux. I also want to make sure that everybody sees at the end of the Getting Started guide. So if this is your first time using Flux, this is really the place to start, is the Get Started guide. Actually, you might want to start with the core concepts, but we've already gone over some of that. Start at the beginning. But Getting Started is an important guide, and I want to highlight at the very end, assuming that you've made it all the way through this guide, there are 2 more links to follow, and you should definitely follow at least one of these to the end to really understand what Flux is doing. So like I said, there's a lot of docs. There are a lot of features. If you look at this, under the guides section, we have, looks like at least 10 different guides for different facets of Flux that you may want to use all of them, or you may only be interested in using some of them. I recommend setting up notifications for one. It will help you with this issue we saw where the Helm release has extra information embedded in it that you can only access by reading the events. Well, notifications are all events. So you can get the events out of the cluster and see in relatively real time what is happening and when things have gone wrong. You can use Microsoft Teams or Slack or another notification system to do all of that. But I wanted to make sure that you at least are aware of these 2 guides at the end of the multi-cluster setup here. Because once you've done the basic Flux Getting Started Bootstrap workflow, you have an installation of Flux and you could just use it and that would be fine, but you'll probably run into some issues that are covered by these guides. So those are to help finish your Flux education. I'm not sure I've really done justice to the difference between these. Honestly, I haven't had a chance to use Arc or the AKS add-on. I've only seen them demonstrated. You may have the same issue that I did. Maybe you run into, there's a restriction on your Azure account and it will only allow you to install certain things. And the person who's needed to abate that restriction is unavailable or does not exist. Maybe there's no one managing your, and it's on you to figure out exactly what the docs say you should be doing to enable those things. So generic Flux doesn't interact with the AKS API outside of Kubernetes at all. It's just installing Flux in the normal way. And it matches everything that you will find in the Flux docs. So that's the reason why I presented that primarily today. And like I said, there are a lot of guides for Flux. I think we are running up against the end of our time shortly. So if there are any questions, it would be great to have some questions and feedback from the audience. I'm really curious to know whether you will use, whether you may use this or you would consider using this. Or if you've used Flux before, if I've totally scared you off of the experience of using Flux, hopefully not. Just going to go through my list here, make sure that I got everything that I really wanted to cover today. Oh, we didn't see Flux actually upgrade that way. So let's go to see what's different here. Did we? Okay. So what happens on upgrade? We've got this workflow. It's configured to run every hour, or we can run it manually. And if we watch and see what the workflow is doing, it's running this command, flux install export, with some options. Is it going to run? Hosted agent. Looks like it failed. All right, I see what's wrong. So this is for the production cluster. We're on S cluster. We'll give it one more try. What this should do is it should open us a pull request, which will upgrade Flux. So we can watch Flux upgrade itself. Hello. Yeah, so we've got our pull request here. It says upgrade Flux. We're going to merge this. And within a couple of seconds, we should see Flux starting to upgrade itself. Hopefully. Yes, no? Well, I'm not really sure. Oh, it did work. We just weren't patient enough. There it is. Flux is upgrading itself. So this is the kind of experience that we'd like to get, is more upgrades that happen through a pull request workflow. Hopefully this has been instructive and helpful, and hope that you enjoyed this. If we don't have any questions, I think we can start wrapping up.
Yeah.
Hi, Kingdon. Yeah, there's no questions as such.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I hope everyone enjoyed this. It's been great being here. Thanks for having me on today.
That's great. Thank you very much, Kingdon. It was a great session, and we hopefully will see you again next time. Definitely.
Okay. Wonderful.
Brilliant. Thanks very much.
All right.